You are looking at 7 plants that can slash your grocery bill. Not someday, this season. A 64 square foot garden that spits out $600 in produce. The secret isn't more space, it's the right 7. While your neighbor spends $50 a month on herbs that rot, you'll harvest $100 of basil from a $2.50 seed packet. Choose high-value crops for small spaces. Most backyard gardeners get it exactly backwards. I am talking about 7 specific plants that turn a 64 square foot bed into a grocery savings engine. With food prices climbing 2.5% this year, the real question isn't can you garden, it's which seeds do you buy. Because the margin between profit and loss isn't your soil, it's your crop list. And most backyard gardeners get that list exactly wrong. They plant what's easy. They plant what their grandparents planted. They plant what looks good in a glossy catalog. And then October arrives. They've spent $200 on soil, trellises, and drip irrigation, and they harvest $40 worth of zucchini they can't give away. Corn is the worst offender. A seed packet costs $3, takes up 16 square feet of garden for the whole summer, and gives you maybe 12 ears. That's 25 cents an ear. The exact same price as the grocery store running a sale. You didn't save a dime. You subsidized your own summer labor. The problem is not your soil, your sunlight, or your attention span. The problem is that nobody ever sat you down and asked one question. What does your family actually buy? When I met a gardener named Silas outside Asheville, he pulled out his grocery receipts from a full year. He had saved them in a shoebox. He cross-referenced every vegetable he paid for against the cost of growing it himself. That shoebox changed everything I thought I knew about growing food. Tomatoes, basil, snap peas, his family practically printed cash growing those. Potatoes, corn, watermelons, they were bleeding money. Silas did something most of us never do. He ran the numbers. And here is the number that rearranged my brain. The average American gardener will spend $70 on plants and materials to yield $160 in food, according to a nationwide study by the National Gardening Association. That's a $90 net gain for an entire season of work. You are earning about 50 cents an hour to sweat in the sun. But Silas, he wasn't harvesting $90. He was harvesting $600 from the same square footage, the same water bill, the same time. Because he grew only 7 plants. 7 crops that supermarkets overcharge for, that grow vertically or densely, and that produce multiple harvests instead of one and done. Now, I promised you the list, but there's a rule buried inside that shoebox, a method for picking your own core 7. That matters more than the list itself, because if you don't understand this one principle, you can plant the exact same crops and still break even. And the people who designed the modern seed catalog are counting on you never learning what it is. Here it is. The principle Silas pulled from that shoebox was not a list of plants. It was a filter. He called it the 3-question test. And once you hear it, you will never open a seed catalog the same way again. Question 1. What does my family actually eat every single week? Not what looks fun to grow. Not what your neighbor handed you starts for. What do you pay cash money for right now, month after month, at the grocery store? If your household burns through a clamshell of basil every 5 days, that is not a garnish. That is a line item. And a single basil plant grown from a $2 seed packet that contains 40 seeds will pump out leaves from June through October. The same volume of fresh basil, bought at $4 a clamshell, would cost you over $100. The seed packet costs $2.50. That is not gardening. That is a 4,000% return. That is printing money in dirt. Question 2. What costs the most per pound? And this is where most backyard beds fail. A potato costs less than $1 a pound. A russet is the cheapest calorie in the produce aisle. Why would you dedicate 16 square feet of your prime garden space for an entire season to grow something that is already almost free? It is a negative investment. You are losing square footage you could have used for a crop that retails for $8 a pound. The shoebox doesn't care about pride. It cares about margin. Question 3. What can I harvest more than once? This is the secret weapon of the small space grower. A head of iceberg lettuce is a one-and-done proposition. You cut it, it's over. But leaf lettuce, arugula, spinach, Swiss chard, you cut the outer leaves, the center keeps growing. One 6-foot row of cut-and-come-again lettuce produces salad for 4 months. The grocery store version, bagged and washed, runs $5 a bag and wilts in 3 days. Your version costs 30 cents in seed and stands fresh in the garden until you walk out with scissors. The shoebox told Silas something else. The crops that pass all 3 questions are almost never the ones shown on the front of the catalog. The front of the catalog is designed to sell you a dream, not a balance sheet. Gorgeous, glossy photos of pumpkins you'll never eat, corn you'll lose to squirrels, watermelons that need 100 square feet to sprawl. The seed companies are not lying to you. They are showing you exactly the crops that make them the most repeat business. Because when your cheap filler crops fail or break even, you don't blame the catalog. You blame your soil. You buy amendments. You subscribe to their YouTube channel. You try again next year. The machinery wants you planting potatoes and corn. The shoebox wants you planting the 7. And now you have earned the list. Number 1, cherry tomatoes. Not beefsteaks, not heirlooms that crack. Cherry tomatoes produced by the pound endlessly for months. A single plant in a cage yields 10 to 30 pounds. At $3 a pint, the math is medieval. Number 2, basil. We covered the numbers, but here's what makes it critical. Basil is the crop that teaches you the difference between garnish and staple. If you cook Italian, Thai, or anything with fresh herbs, basil alone can recoup your entire garden budget by July. Number 3, green onions. You buy a bunch at the store for $1.29. You use half, the rest goes slimy in the crisper. Here, you plant the white root ends of the ones you already bought. They regrow forever. You will never pay for green onions again. Number 4, pole beans, not bush beans. Pole beans climb a trellis, use vertical space, and produce 10 pounds of beans over 2 months per 10-foot row. At $4 a pound for fresh organic beans, that trellis just became the highest yielding 2 square feet in your yard. Number 5, peppers. A single bell pepper plant costs $1.50 as a start. It will give you 6 to 10 peppers. Those same peppers at the store cost $1.50 each. You are buying the whole plant's output for the price of 1 pepper. And hot peppers are even better. They dry, they store, they cost a fortune as fancy salsas and chili flakes. Number 6, cut and come again lettuce mix. You plant a 3-foot row once. You cut leaves every 3 days for 12 weeks. 1 packet of seed, less than $4, replaces $60 of bagged salad that would have turned to slime in your fridge. Number 7, radishes. They grow in 25 days, take up almost no space, and cost pennies. But that is not why they are on the list. Radishes are your confidence crop. They are the first thing you harvest when you are questioning whether this whole experiment is going to work. They build momentum. The shoebox taught Silas that momentum is worth more than money, because a gardener who harvests something in May keeps showing up in June. But even with the right 7, even with the shoebox filter, even with perfect execution, there is a trap that Silas didn't see coming. A trap that swallows $91 of that $600 haul before you ever taste a leaf. And it is hidden in a single item almost every new gardener buys on day 1. The item, a raised bed kit. Not the lumber, the kit. The one with corner brackets, a laminated instruction sheet, and a brand name printed on the box. Silas pulled his receipts from his first season. He had spent $238 on 2 cedar raised bed kits, $40 on bagged organic soil, and another $50 on a drip irrigation system he saw in a YouTube ad. He had not yet planted a single seed. He was $328 in the hole. That number is not a mistake. It is the business model. The home gardening industry has quietly shifted over the last decade from selling seeds to selling infrastructure. The profit is not in the $2 seed packet. It is in the $80 cedar plank, the $25 bag of specialty soil, the $40 automatic watering timer, and the subscription fertilizer box. The industry knows something most first-year gardeners do not. If they can convince you to spend $300 before you harvest a leaf, you will break even in year one. Feel like a genius and never realize you lost money. The shoebox does not lie. And when Silas cross-referenced his harvest value against his startup costs that first summer, the math was brutal. He had harvested $140 of produce. He had spent $328. He had paid $188 for the privilege of gardening in the sun. That is the moment most people quit. They tell themselves they do not have the gift. They say the soil is bad, the pests are worse, the season is too short. They never ask the question Silas asked that night at his kitchen table. What if I never bought any of that again? The second question test. The one for the gardener, not the crops. What costs am I buying today that will cost me nothing tomorrow? Silas started auditing every single item. Cedar boards. He drove to a local sawmill and bought rough-cut hemlock seconds for $12 instead of $80. Containers. He hit yard sales on Saturday mornings, 5-gallon buckets for 50 cents, old stock tanks for $10. Soil. He started a compost pile with kitchen scraps, grass clippings, and shredded cardboard. No bagged soil for year two. Water. He built a simple rain barrel from a used 55-gallon food-grade drum and a gutter diverter. Total cost, $30. His irrigation system became a garden hose and a $5 watering wand. The shoebox taught him that every dollar not spent on stuff is a dollar the garden didn't need to earn. And here is the number that rewired his brain. Year two. Same 64 square feet. Same 7 crops. Total startup cost, $41. That included the seeds, which he had saved from the previous fall. Harvest value, over $600. Net savings, $559. That was not a fluke. That was the filter, the 7, and the audit combined. And when Silas told me this, he leaned back in his chair and said something I have not stopped thinking about. He said, "The garden wasn't paying me back in money. It was paying me back in something that costs even more." And that is the part of the shoebox nobody sees coming. Not the list, not the numbers. The one thing that changes the entire equation if you do not understand it before you plant your first seed. The one thing Silas told me at that kitchen table after the shoebox and the spreadsheets was this. The garden paid him back in time. He didn't mean it saved him time. He meant it gave him time back that he had lost to something he never noticed he was losing it to. The mental load of the grocery store, the parking lot, the fluorescent lights, the sticker shock in the produce aisle, the guilt of throwing away half a bag of slimy lettuce because you didn't cook fast enough. He said his garden didn't need him to go to the store. His garden was the store. It opened at dawn and closed at dusk. It didn't run out of basil at 6 p.m. on a Tuesday. It didn't charge him $4 because the supply chain got snarled. And the very first week he walked into his backyard with kitchen scissors and walked out with dinner. He felt something he had not felt in a decade, a little less helpless. That feeling, multiplied over an entire season, was worth more to him than the $559. The money was the proof. The feeling was the payoff. And here is the thing. The home gardening industry doesn't put in a marketing email because you can't package it in a cedar kit. The average American household will drop 6.6% of its food budget on fresh vegetables, according to the USDA, and then throw away a third of what they buy. Silas's garden reversed both numbers. It eliminated the waste completely. You don't cut kale that you don't intend to eat. It reduced the cost per pound to the price of water and a handful of compost. And it eliminated the car and the time and the quiet frustration of watching your grocery bill climb by 2.5% every single year, while the produce itself got noticeably smaller, blander, and shorter-lived on your counter. Silas was tasting tomatoes at 23 bricks grown 10 feet from his door. A supermarket equivalent was shipped green from 1,000 miles away. The shoebox couldn't calculate flavor, but his 5-year-old daughter could. And when that kid stopped asking for goldfish crackers and started asking for cherry tomatoes, still warm from the sun, Silas knew the math had become completely irrelevant. The garden had paid him back in something no grocery chain could ever stock. But there is one last thing the shoebox revealed. And it's a detail so small that almost everyone overlooks it, until they realize it is the entire point. The 7 crops Silas grew, the ones that passed the 3 questions, the ones that paid for themselves 20 times over, they never once showed up together on the same page of any catalog he'd ever seen. Not a single seed company in America sells a grocery cut kit of cherry tomatoes, basil, green onions, pole beans, peppers, cut and come again lettuce, and radishes. They could. They choose not to. Because the person who buys that kit never buys 6 other failed varieties. Never comes back for soil conditioners and drip timers and copper slug tape. That person becomes the gardener who just quietly harvests $500 from 64 square feet and doesn't need to buy anything else next year. The industry is not evil. It is just not optimized for your self-sufficiency. It is optimized for your return visit. Silas didn't beat the system by gardening harder. He beat it by gardening smarter, with a shoebox and 3 questions. And the question I want to leave you with before we wrap this up is not what you'll plant. It's what you'll stop paying for. Because the single most profitable crop in any garden is the one that replaces the grocery store line item you've been bleeding every week without noticing. And if you get that right, you won't just cut your bill. You'll change your relationship to every dollar you spend on food for the rest of your life. Silas told me one last thing that night. He said most people think gardening is about plants. It's not. It's about systems. The grocery store is a system. The seed catalog is a system. The shoebox is just a system you build for yourself instead of the one that was handed to you. And once you see that, you can't unsee it. You start looking at every box of baby greens and every bunch of cilantro and you ask, why am I paying someone else to grow this? Ship it and let it rot in my fridge when I could walk 20 feet and cut it fresh for free. And I think the reason so many people are starting gardens right now isn't just inflation. It's the feeling that the systems we're plugged into are getting a little more expensive and a little less reliable. And we want one system we can actually see, touch, and control. If this video made sense to you, if the shoebox filter clicked, there's a special offer through the link in the first pinned comment. It's something I built to help you take this exact approach and apply it to whatever space you've got. Hit subscribe if you want more like this. I'll see you in the next one.